Well, we had a good time with Andy Martell. That was a lot of fun. He's the chief OT guy, as I said, and he's written his own Hebrew grammar, really good one. So we had a little bit of insight. We're going to do a little bit more to Hebrew later today. But on your outline, we're on page 2. B, how to proceed. Number 1. Semantics, and then we have A, fundamental categories. We've done words as signifiers, number 1, marks on the page, text criticism. We are on number 2, meanings, conceptual signifiers, and talk a little bit about that. So, but let me try to have kind of more of a global, overall approach to this. The key, Andy actually said something just at the end that's worth talking about, and that is components of meaning. Let me just put this up here. Components of meaning. That meaning isn't just one big blob. It has various components to it, and various words will have more or fewer components. So, for example, if you have a general word such as gun, it's likely to have that notion of firearm, but not necessarily whether it's shoulder-fired or handheld or mounted. See? So what happens then is you have underneath it, let's say, if you add shoulder-fired, you get rifle. If you have handheld, you get pistol. If you have, for example, mounted, you might have cannon. And now I want you to notice what's happened with this. It's not really that words like rifle and pistol mean something completely different. They just have an additional component of meaning to them. But they may share all kinds of components of meaning, like this. Now look at, this is what's sometimes called taxonomic hierarchy. So you have a hierarchy of meaning, with this being, as you go this way, you get more general. And so in general, the way a language works is, if you want a synonym, you go up the taxonomic scale. So if you're writing an essay and you don't want to keep using the word rifle, thank you, Mark, you use as a synonym gun, you don't use pistol. See, so you don't go across like this with something with different components. You go with things with fewer components, which then cover it. You could illustrate this well also with dogs. So you have dog, and then you may have, let's say, retrievers. But under retrievers, you could have golden retrievers, see, or other kinds. So think of it like this. The more necessary components there are for an item, the more specific it becomes. And the fewer components there are, the less specific and the more things it can cover. And so you can now then, as I say, do synonyms by going up the taxonomic scale. Now, you get the phenomenon of what I'm talking about, and I introduce it this way. To show you some issues for meanings or conceptual signifiers, in other words, these components of conceptual signifiers, features of them, often that's what we're arguing about. Okay? So let's go, please, to John 1:13. Now, we looked at this briefly before, but now we have some weaponry to do a little bit better analysis. Now, the word aner, John 1:13. In the Greek, the word aner means man, but it is more specific than the more general word for man, which is anthropos, which we get with a word like anthropology. Right? Anthropology is about people. It is not about males. It is about people. So anthropology as man illustrates here the way in which this is more general than aner or gine, which is the word for woman, which you know from a word like gynecology. Okay? Now, this word for man is more specific than anthropos and has the same level of specificity and therefore is not the same as gune. But under aner is also another possibility. And that is you add in an extra component and you get husband. Okay? Kind of like if you're in Tennessee or something and the woman says, my man's not home right now. Stand by your man. Alright? That kind of thing. Well, what that is that's that same use, but you are really adding in the component of marriage. Okay? Now, here's the problem. When you come upon aner in the Greek text, does it have this component of male, adult, only, or does it have let me change colors here. Does it have the additional component of married? Okay? Take a look at John 1:13. John 1:13. So we'll have a reading. Jim, you have the ESV. Yeah. Okay. So this will be our kind of baseline. Go ahead.
Who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God.
All right. Now, who has the NIV? Anybody have an NIV?
I think it's up there on the piano.
Oh, it's burning my hands. All right. Well, I don't know, Jim. See, you're on that like fur on a weasel. That's good. All right. All right. Now, Ed, I'm going to put you in charge of the NIV, and you have to wash your hands after you use this thing. But all right,
They're already speaking.
yeah, okay. I want you to read what the NIV has for this.
Already?
Yep.
Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God.
Husbands. See, now most people are going to think, well, where did this drop out of the sky suddenly? Husband as opposed to man. It's this taxonomic hierarchy issue. See, it's actually the same word, and they have chosen to drop down here with that rather than here. In other words, they didn't translate this as tree or slave or something like that. No. You're arguing here about components. That's all you're arguing about. It's not like they don't know what aner means, but they're making this move. Now, I think that's a foolish move because he's being much more general here about will of the flesh and so on like that. But I'm just trying to explain why they would be doing something like this. Now, let's take this one, and now we go to a harder example with the same word. Okay? Go please to 2 Timothy 2:12. Now, you know, this unit now is how to proceed. What I'm trying to make you aware of now. Wait a minute, that's not right. It's 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy, sorry. Every place I said second, I mean. What I'm trying to do here is get you aware of the kind of decisions you have to make. Now, this is that passage about let a woman be silent and so on. All right, now listen to this and see how this goes here. Starting with 11, we'll do 11 and 12. So, Jim, give us the baseline.
Let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet.
Yeah, First Timothy. 1 Timothy, I said second, that was a mistake. 1 Timothy 2:12. Okay, Jim, read it again. A few people weren't, that's my fault.
Okay. Let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet.
Exercise authority over an heir. Now, everybody simply thinks this is simple. But remember, heir has more possible components of meaning. Is he perhaps talking about husbands? As opposed to, you know, Ed, you've been around long enough to know how this has roiled all kinds of arguments. And see, everybody tends to take this as meaning simply man, i.e. any man. Maybe not. See, maybe not. Maybe we need this additional component in here, especially when you consider, look what happens in verse 13. Jim, read verse 13.
For Adam was formed first, then Eve.
All right, so he's gone back to the creation story. Now just remember this. Adam and Eve are the first man and first woman, but they are also the first husband and wife. So you are never sure quite when you get this, whether he is just talking about, because Eve was for Adam specifically, not just for any man. So this is what you have to be aware of at all times. And when when a person is translating, because you and I have talked about this phrase, here's what you cannot be doing. You cannot be reading the English translation and checking the Greek. You got to be reading the Greek, because there is, you guys probably wouldn't know this term, but it's big among people who do classical languages. The word pony. A pony is a translation you use to help you when you're translating. You know, like to get you over the rough spots. Okay? Well, I like to put it this way. You gotta try to extinguish the English pony in your head. See, you've got this pony in your head that sort of suggests what the passage ought to mean. You have to somehow extinguish that pony. And this is a perfect example, because every translation will say man, and I believe it's husband, on the exegesis of this. But you never get there if the pony just overpowers you.
Well, my question then goes back to, I know we've talked about this, and we did mention it a few times, about the cultural way of thinking. Their word order, the way they think. Now, this would most likely be written in Greek, but would they not be thinking in Aramaic?
But this is written to people in Ephesus.
Okay, so
that would be more
formal writing. okay, so it would be more, it would be a Hochdeutsch as opposed to Plattdeutsch.
Yeah, yeah.
In its construction.
Yes,
And that
and
also,
it is.
and then it would also, in its rhetorical structure.
Right. Yeah, yes, now, just realize this, we're kind of getting in the weeds here, but it's an important point. What most interpreters don't realize is that the epistles that Paul writes to Asia Minor sites, Ephesus, Colossae, Galatia, and so on, actually have a slightly different form of Greek than do the ones written to Europe, which would be Thessalonians, Corinthians, Romans. All right? Asia Minor, where Ephesus was, and the Timothy letters are written to most probably Ephesus. The Asia Minor letters have a more complicated and bombastic Greek to them. This has led a lot of people to think that Paul didn't write them because Ephesians has a different style than 1 Corinthians. What they don't realize is that the people from Ephesus and around there actually use a different kind of rhetorical Greek than the mainland did. Gorgias, Gorgias, who was a huge rhetorician guy, came from Ephesus, went to Athens eventually, and so on. But Gorgias had this Gorgian style that was kind of real overwrought, huge sentences. So, for example, when you read Ephesians 1, there is one sentence that extends from verse 3 to verse 12. Well, that's Asia Minor style. That's the kind of thing they did, see? And it's not the style of 1 Thessalonians, because in Macedonia, they do something different. So, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, you just got to kind of be aware of where you are as you do this stuff. And by the way, I really think this has been a problem for translations over the years who homogenize the translation. And by that I mean, all of the books of the Bible sort of sound the same in terms of complexity. They shouldn't. Hebrews is hugely complex. And you can't take complex sentences and make them simple, I think, just because you want to kind of make it understandable at the 5th grade level. The fact is, Hebrews isn't written for people at the 5th grade level. It is a really complex, by far the best Greek in the New Testament. And it's got cool constructions and stuff like that, that you just have to be aware of. So, like, with this particular thing, there's a kind of an interesting rhetorical thing that happens as Paul starts going bump, 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 and he doesn't do this in other places. So, this kind of thing has never bothered me, that the Greek itself is different, like say between Ephesians and Thessalonians, because it's being written to two completely different cultural groups.
Well, it's just so, if you're looking at this, and we're using it with the way we think in English,
Yeah.
It's just the way, the way we construct our sentences, all that. You would think that, well, maybe, Adam and Eve portion should have come first, that we would know that, oh, this is where we're creating our metaphor, as opposed to coming last. It's sort of like having to wade through German, and all of a sudden, oh, there's the verb at the end.
There's the verb, yeah.
Well,
let me just show you here what I think is the construction, and we'll go on from where Jim was. Let's go to 13. Adam was made first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman, having been deceived, fell into transgression. All right, so now what have we got for order? Adam, Eve. Adam, the woman. Now, if you're going A, B, now, let the other shoe drop. Okay. What might well be the subject then of verse 15? But he will be saved through the birth of the child. In other words, Adam, Eve, Adam, Eve, Adam will be saved by what only a woman can do, which is childbirth.
Why does the ESV say she?
They're kind of not, well, there's no subject there. See, there's no subject, it's just so basic about it.
Okay.
But if you put the pony out of your head and just read the stuff, then you stop and you say, but wait a minute. At each stage, he's kind of getting more generalized. He's going from Eve to the woman and so on. So, what is the subject? You've got to actually be careful that you don't make these assumptions when, for example, the specific subject of this is not expressed. Is not expressed. So, now, you know, what's interesting is it says through the childbirth. Now, that could be childbirth. It could be, because there's an article there, the birth of the child, i.e., our Savior. Because, of course, that was the original promise. So you can't just say, does it say in the ESV childbirth?
Childbirth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, might be, but with the article there, it could be the birth of the child, which only the woman can bring into existence. Right.
Could you
This
put,
one, Jim, says childbirth.
What's that?
Childbirth.
Yeah, but it doesn't say the childbirth.
Mine does. I have the Revised Standard Version, and that's given us the alternate translation.
Oh, what do they say? Read the
It
note.
says, or by the birth of the child.
Yeah. See, well, they've hidden that in the footnote. Well, I mean, they've been fair enough. Okay, they've been fair enough. Now, do you guys have another note like that?
no.
How about in the study Bible?
Yeah, or by the birth of the child.
And what version is that?
Or
Oh, RSV, yeah. But now, what about here? Yeah, is there a note like this?
Well, she there on 15, it says, Paul already considers consideration of one woman's Eve's sin. The salvation provided for all women by the birth of the child, Jesus, who would defeat Satan with the hands of all women.
Oh,
Saved
no.
through childbearing.
Well, yeah, here, saved through childbearing. Women are not saved by giving birth through faith in the child Jesus. Now, see, they don't really, I wonder. Wow. Now, by the way, and now, let's see what you guys have, because let's go on to the end of that verse. Okay? What does it say? It says, he or she will be saved through the birth of the child, if what? If they remain. Where'd they come from? Weren't we just talking about one? See, I think this shows you that both men and women are being considered with the they. It's not the women. You have to, this is a problem of referent. Remember, now we're at point A1 or something of our diagram, of our outline. So, all of this is always an exercise in paying attention to really small details. Like, we just switched to plural. Why did we do that? So, does anybody know about that? About the plural, if they remain?
Yeah, the note, and as the
Yeah.
study Bible says, for he speaks of the whole class of mothers.
Maybe.
Well,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right, the whole class of mothers. Yeah, I think you're much better off taking they as men with them actually being saved through the birth of the child, that which is what the woman can do.
So this is essentially a committee translation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a committee translation, and that's always, as we would say on the south side of Milwaukee, Polish. Right? Because they have to compromise. And they always compromise in a direction that is sort of the most popular.
But it seems like the compromise is done without regard to actually understanding theology.
No, Mike, you don't know how frustrating this is. When I was advising the ESV, this actually happened, what I'm going to tell you. I was saying to them, the verb forms, you're not being accurate in the translation because you're changing imperfects, which say things like he was doing or he began to do. And you're just changing them to the simple past, the aorist, he did. And I said, you can't do that to the verbs. They actually wrote back and said, we have chosen to under-translate, and not reflect the nuance of the imperfect because there's not an agreement on commitment. Now, this is, as Robert Price used to say, a testimonium paupertatis, a testimony of poverty, that you can't actually, well, no, let me put it this way, that you know you're doing wrong, but you do it anyway. You know, how about putting a choice in and putting a footnote or something like that? I mean, I just couldn't believe that. But they actually said this to me. I can testify to this. We have chosen to under-translate. Now, so there you are, Mike. I mean, I don't know, you know, I mean, it's sort of like you playing or something, somebody's wondering, you know, well, what sort of tempo should we take at? Let's look at what Toscanini did, or let's look at what George Sell did. Well, I don't know, that's too complicated. Let's just do something ordinary. I mean, you got to actually work at it. Try to figure this out. Yeah, this is a really interesting passage in many respects. Just because there's all kinds of Greek stuff there that people aren't sort of paying attention to. By the way, here's another fact. With this business of, in verse 12, I do not permit a woman to teach. Now, almost always in our circles, that is seen as reflecting the pastoral office. I can't believe that for a minute. Because didasko and teaching in Ephesians, we've taken a look at that passage. He gave the apostles, the prophets, the pastors, okay? Let's see, the prophets, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and the teachers. And they're two separate things, as we argue. So, I mean, if you come away with nothing else, come away with this. You've got to get the pony out of your head. See, we're so used to thinking that we think we know what passages mean, and you just got to try to overcome that in some way. This is why it's helpful to have several translations, and then to get a couple of, you know, I always recommend that you get an NASB. It's clunky, but it does stuff other ones don't. And what you brought up, Jim, the Berkeley version. The Berkeley version has some very interesting takes on it. And that's a one-man show. That's a one-man show, Gilkey's. And therefore he has the you know, chance to do stuff that the committee won't get mad. Something like that. Okay, now let me show you another one. You know, I'm always accused of, you know, people said, trouble with your stuff is you always choose such hard examples that are controversial. Well, yeah, you want to do that, and at some point take simple examples. So take this. This is really terrific. Genesis 3:16. Now we got to go to the Hebrew here. Genesis 3:16. This is really incredible. And this is components. This is components again. Now this is the statement to Eve. It's toward the end that I'm looking. So Jim, give us the baseline.
To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
Okay, now that's that last line. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Now, what desire? The word here is teshukah in the Hebrew. It is only used 3 times in the whole Old Testament. 3 times. Let's look at the other 2. So what we'll do in this kind of crude way here, we'll put up desire. Now, is that desire, what you desire, is that positive or is that negative? In other words, it's a positive thing you have towards somebody, or is the desire such that you want to dominate that person? We're going to look at the 2 examples. First one is from the Song of Solomon, 7.
There is a translation.
No, don't get there. Don't get there.
Okay.
All right, just hold on. 7, verse 10, I believe it is in the English. It's 11 in a Song of Solomon, 7:10. Is it 7:10? Yeah. Okay. Well, we had our Hebrew scholar do it. Go ahead.
I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me.
All right. I am my beloveds, and on me, teshukatho is his teshukah, his desire. So, we've got, let's see, the English was 10, right? All right. So, we've got Song of Solomon, 7:10. All right. Now, go back to Genesis. To 4 verse 7. And this is Cain after the slaying of Abel. So let's, verse 7, Jim.
If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it.
Oh,
Same note.
wow,
The other verse.
interesting. So, same teshukah. For you is its desire, and you shall master it, rule over it. So this is Genesis 4:7. All we're arguing about is one component. It's either positive, giving, and so on, or it's negative with domination and so forth. All right? Rewind. What is it in Genesis 3:16? Now, interestingly enough, the Genesis passage in 4:7 is virtually parallel to 3:15 about mastering it and so on. And so, all right, let's hear what your note is.
Okay, both of them have the footnote of the translation on down in the study Bible.
Okay.
That says instead of the word for, the word against. Both of the verses have that same note.
It's his desire for you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Desire
desire against you.
Desire against you.
Oh,
That's an alternative according to the translation.
kind of an odd, I mean, they're getting at this, and then how do they go on?
That's it, just it pointing out that
No,
preposition.
well, I mean in the translation. Is the desire?
Your desire should be for your husband, and they're saying instead of for the word
Yeah,
against.
but how does it continue?
Okay, and he shall rule over you.
Right. Now, that the Hebrew and, is often just used to mean but. So it could be this. Your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. Or it could be your desire will be to dominate your husband, but he must rule over you. He shall rule over you. So, what I'm getting at, though, is this is all we're arguing about here, right here. See, it's not that suddenly there's some secret other meaning or something like that. This has to do with an intense desire. Well, is it? I mean, you could say there's this kind of intense desire with Trump derangement syndrome or something like that, you know, to dominate what's happened with the election. That's negative. Or it could be a really positive thing. People who are supporters of Hillary and so forth. So, this is just a terrific example. And what's hard about it is these are the only three uses in the entire whole bill. We have no other examples to help us out. So they don't have a note on that. I mean, not the translation, just a note on the passage.
Down below is the third paragraph. Start from the four. Verse 3:15. I was supposed to do
She showed me that it's a lot of fluff.
That's a lot of
Well, as one of my colleagues used to say, for most commentators, when there is darkness, they hold up no light. But when the sun is shining brightly, they will hold up their small candle. All right, so without looking up anything, I'm simply going to make one other point on this, and that is that you get this component issue with the word father. Now, the receptor has components in his head about the word father. Is it a loving person who takes care of people? I mean, we all know it's male, foster children, and so on, all that. But what about these other factors here, these other components? Is it guy who leaves when times get tough? So, you say, our Father who art in heaven. Everybody knows on one level what the components are, but there are going to be these other ones, and those are going to be the ones you argue about. And if you're teaching a Bible class, teaching confirmation or kids or something like that, you're going to have to be aware of that. It's not like father suddenly means slave or something like that, but it's just these small little differences. Okay, so the last point under this is going to be this business of components, of features of the conceptual signifier is magnified once we go to non-literal language. And let's take salt, has, salt. Go to Matthew 5:13. That's not 6, it's 5. 5:13. Matthew 5:13. Salt. Yep. You know the passage. You are the salt of the earth. Okay? When it's used metaphorically, what are the components of meaning? What are the features of the conceptual signified that should be placed in? Now, let's just ask you. Marilyn, what have you thought when you hear that passage? What have you thought that what salt has as its meaning? Okay, Janice, what would you say you think of when you hear that passage?
That's
Tasty. Okay, yeah, okay. So, it's sort of like, who's the guy in the Goldberg's Big Tasty? Yeah. All right, now, anybody else want to just volunteer an idea? What do you think?
Oh, it's essential. Yeah.
It's a staple,
Huh?
a staple.
Okay, now people are starting to say some stuff. Look, salt had at least 5 uses in the ancient world. And so when it's used metaphorically, these possibilities are in the conceptual signifier. Let me just tell you, it could be used for seasoning, exactly right. It could also be used as a preservative, which we know they salted meats on. It is also a purgative. That is to say, it was used to on rotting meat to kind of help to purify it. Related, it is an effective destroyer. When the Romans finally, in 146, defeated the Carthaginians in the Third Punic War, they sowed all the fields with salt in North Africa, and they were forever infertile. Okay? And then the last thing is money. You know, when you say somebody's worth is salt, that's what you mean. Salt as an actual medium of exchange. All right? Well, what's Jesus saying here? Isn't that interesting?
Given your third meaning, that changes the conception that I've always had about that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was a purifier of rotten meat.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that,
Now, you want to, here, just hold that thought. Go to the passage that bedeviled me for months in the commentary. The last verse, the last 2 verses of Mark 9, 49 and 50. Last 2 verses of Mark 9. Now, if you just let Jesus' words flow over you here, it's kind of unbelievable because it's like he's all over the place. Everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if salt becomes unsalty, with what will you salt it? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. Ah! Just remember, I always take refuge in this. If we don't understand it, it's my fault. It's not his fault. Okay? But you can see all kinds of meanings there. Everyone will be salted with fire. Fire is going to have the effect of salt, which is a purifier.
yeah, see,
Which is a purifier. Exactly.
and I hadn't considered that was one of the uses of salt in the ancient times.
Yes.
I was thinking preservative
Right.
or tenderizer, but not purifier.
Yeah, exactly. And but then he says, salt is good, but if salt becomes unsalty, with what will you salt it? Now he's probably referring to them like you are the salt of the earth. Well, I mean, there's possibilities here. You can be something that helps purify the earth. You can be a preservative to the earth. Then he says, have salt within yourselves and be at peace with one another. What I'm trying to point out with you here is, it's not like salt means something wildly different. there are these features to it, and you've got to choose which one contextually. Now, by the way, Mike, to go to your thing, what occurred to me, and this is the direction I went with this, but I haven't seen anybody who particularly does this, is in 1 Corinthians. So everybody go to 1 Corinthians. Now let's see here. All right, go to 1 Corinthians 3. Starting with verse 11 and going through verse 15. So Jim, read that.
For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire.
Now there, I think, is your parallel to Jesus' statement. You'll be salted with fire. Fire is going to do the work of salt, of purifying. It's going to burn off the dross, so to speak. I mean, this is an incredible passage. It's an incredible passage. If someone's works remain, which he has built, he will receive a reward. But if the work of someone is burned up, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, but as through fire. I take this to mean, I developed this quite a bit in the commentary, that on the last day, it's going to be pretty scary. Not in the sense that you're condemned, but anybody who thinks you can trifle with the Holy God,
Never struck me before, but I'm wondering, does the Catholic Church take that to support their belief in purgatory? I know it originates from something in the Apocrypha.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
But do they take that to say this is, only the saints will go right to heaven, and the others will be in the fire?
Yeah, see, I don't know.
They can
but-
almost make that fit for purgatory.
Yeah. What's so interesting about this, though, Jim, is there are these passages always in Paul where systematicians love to ignore them. You know, you just go to the ones you like and so on, or sanctification and stuff. But it's just like in Mark 9:49. Everybody will be salted with fire. Wow! Yeah. So don't trifle with what's happening. Now, it doesn't mean you're condemned, as it says here. But it does mean that you're probably going to have the poop scared out. You know, when that trumpet goes, you're going to be cowering. And those who are pleading the blood of Christ are going to be fine. But don't think God puts up with evil lightly. But you're going to be, what shall I say, purified. So, I wrestled for months and months with that passage because you have the purifying, I think it's the purifying effect of salt, and it could well be that when Jesus says that you are the salt of the earth, that he's going in that direction. It's probably not seasoning, that flavor to life or something. It's probably not it's not the straight destruction like the sowing of salt at Carthage. It could be money, that you are the thing that gives value so that God doesn't destroy the earth, something like that, for the sake of his elect. Well, you know how Abraham argues with God, and if there are 5 righteous in the city, I won't do it, in which case, so whether it's money or preservative, it's probably something like that. But it is interesting how if you just slow down and you ask yourself, you are the salt of the earth, what does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah.
So the thing that confuses me about this is salt is, as you said, preservative, value, all those things.
Yeah.
Fire is just purely destruction.
What's that?
Fire is purely destruction. So it's not like it's purifying necessarily. It's just an
Well, no, but it is, in the sense that it burns off the dross.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you could say that that's almost a subcategory of destroy. Yeah, because it destroys the thing that is proper for it. But its purpose is different. Its purpose is not to destroy it. If you fire metal to harden it, your purpose isn't to destroy it. Right.
But see, I think well, only one of us in this room, I think you, is the only one who's working with steel though, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of us haven't seen, even, doing with like gold, when the jewelers are superheating the gold or for example, forging a piece of metal or a sword. I mean, back then they would have been, working with bronze and fooling around with iron, so they're just getting into that. So this is kind of the up and coming technology. I mean,
right.
For which most of us don't even consider anymore. I mean, let's just jump ahead 200 years into the future, and if everything is coming off of say, 3D printers, how is this sort of imagery going to be wrestled with? Again, we're having to get into their cultural mindset, because 300 years in the future, they're not going to understand that. Oh yeah, in the old days they needed to, when they were particularly dealing with alloys.
They fired it.
Yeah, they had to fire it up, and then and all the oxidized impurities are coming out at the top. I mean, that's, most of us don't even consider that today because we're not connected with that. So what's going to happen 300 years from now?
Yeah, well, people got to hold it before people, which is why I talk to people about stuff like this. Yes, you brought up those evil days in the pelt and steel cans on the floor where we worked at 127 degrees. So, I put this on my sheet because I had such difficulty with this passage for such a long time in Mark 9:49 to 50, and it's Jesus typically being kind of coy about stuff, and he forces you to think about it. It's that simple. It kind of forces you to think.
But when they have had to struggle with the thinking back then, given the fact that they have a cultural...
Yeah, I think it may have been a little bit more obvious. Although when he says, now I think you're right about everyone will be salted with fire. I think that would maybe be more obvious. But the notion of you are the salt of the earth, especially if he says that early on in his ministry at the Sermon on the Mount, I don't know if everybody's getting that, where exactly he's going with that. Now, Jesus doesn't say you are the salt of the earth in Mark, so I didn't look that up, but what would be fun is to look up to see whether a phrase like salt of the earth or people function as salt of the earth, does this occur, for example, in the tragedians? Does it occur in historical writers? Is this a known phrase? You've got to ask yourself that.
I just know, a lot of what you bring up with the culture, we deal with our kids, with their Chinese friends.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's the hierarchy of adjectives or,
Yeah.
because for them it's not a big brown black dog or whatever, it's a black big dog, which,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
because they have a completely different hierarchy and they're just flipping the words in. And sometimes they ask us, we use a expression that they don't understand because for them, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. No, this is exactly right. And this is what we, what exegetes hope to be working on all the time, as opposed to systematicians who come at it from the other end. Oh, okay.
Quick question.
Yeah, sure.
So in the Mark passage, just prior to the, in verse 47.
Yeah.
So it goes on, the second half says, then having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire. Is there a distinction, is there a distinction between fire, hellfire, and burning? And at what point do we begin talking about destruction as opposed to
Right. Well,
hellfire is pretty much destruction.
right. But see, you have to watch out that Jesus moves in his argumentations all the time. So what it is in one verse is not necessarily what's going to be in the next verse. So in 49, where it says, everyone will be salted with fire, I think this has to do with this purifying effect. Well, then he says, salt is good, and if salt becomes unsalty, with what will you salt it? That can't be the fire. So he's moved, okay? And this is what happens all the time. He's moved now to sort of like you are the salt of the earth as either being the preservative or the value of it or something like that. And then when he says, have salt within yourselves, that's certainly not the same thing as 49. So I think one of the hardest things when you're dealing with a saying of Jesus that I have found is you have to be prepared for him to subtly be switching topics on you as he goes along. So you're right about the fire. Which verse were you on there?
48, or 47, sorry. So tail end of 47, it is better for thee to enter into the kingdom of God with 1 eye than having 2 eyes and cast into hellfire. And I was just curious about the grammatical distinction between
Right.
fire and
Yeah. Well, part of the problem here is we're not going to read fire at the end of 47. The manuscripts that are there. Right? So, which kind of changes things. But it's the Gehenna, the pit of fire, which I think in context is just purely destructive. Yeah, right. So, and this is what I had to face in verse 49, where it says, everybody will be salted with fire. Are you talking about the same thing, like everybody's going to go to hell or something like that? Or is there something, and I made the choice of saying that Jesus is moving on. Right? And, I appreciate this question because it helps to illustrate, because people will ask this, why does it take you so long to write the comment? It's just stuff like this. See? So you got this, it's the same idea of fire, you'll be salted with fire. Is that the same fire? Is the referent the same as that? I don't think it But those are the decisions you have to make, and then you have to defend. Because you can't just say, I don't think so, and that's what you have to write out in the commentary.
Well, and one of the earlier verses that you mentioned, you can find it as I go back, it was burned instead of fire in the King James. It seems to me there's got to be a distinction.
Now, was that in the first Corinthians 3 passage? I mean, I think it's worth pursuing your concern.
1 Corinthians 3.
Yeah, 11 to 15. Because the word fire is used there in 13, 15.
That is all fire.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Or Mark 9:49.
See, what occurred to me, this may be of interest to you, what occurred to me in verse 49 is when he says, everyone will be salted with fire. He doesn't say everyone will be fired with salt. So, salted with fire, I took to mean, and this is when my mind went to 1 Corinthians, is everyone will be salted with fire. Fire is going to perform the function of salt. So then you ask, what is the function of salt? And you can see that the description in 1 Corinthians 3 is a description of one of the things that, that salt does. It's a purgative. And as a matter of fact, I didn't bring it along, I didn't know we were going to get into this. As a matter of fact, there is a statement by St. Ignatius in his letter to the Magnesians where he actually talks about this sort of purifying effect of things and so on. It's a very interesting quotation. I'll try to bring that next time because it's really cool.
That Mark passage, I read a passage in Leviticus
Okay.
that said, as an offering of first fruits you may bring to the Lord, but they shall not be offered on the altar for a pleasant aroma. You shall season all your grain offerings with salt. You shall not let the salt of the covenant with your God be missing from your grain offering. With all your offerings you shall offer salt.
Right. Okay, good. Now, no, this is, did you tell me that? Or this is impressive.
She explained.
Now, this is very interesting. You have the King James, right? Well, what Janice was on, in Mark 9:49. Mark 9:49. Because listen to the King James here. There's an interesting variant reading. You know, Mike, eventually everything comes back to signifiers. Because all of a sudden, you're reading a different text. All right, Judy, do it.
For every one shall be salted with fire, and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt.
All right. See, now, I don't read those last words because they're not in the preferred manuscripts. But that's where you get that reference to Leviticus. So, people have, and I think what happened, how that got in, is people are trying to figure out what the heck does this verse mean, and they go like you did to Leviticus. Now, you have to make a decision whether or not you read the additional words which the majority follows. Whether you read them or not, are they sort of interpretively significant, hermeneutically significant? And should we be thinking along the lines of this, that somehow people are a sacrifice to God, or something like this? Well, now you've gone off in a whole different direction, see? So this is salt, I guess, Mike, I should have added that in as a sixth thing, as an offering component, an offering factor, because you have to salt your things with this. Yeah, this is interesting, the way this is developed this morning, because I wasn't thinking that it would, but it shows you, I hate to say this, why it takes so long to write the commentary. I mean, it's really hard. You have to make all these decisions, and then you do have to comment a little bit on the decisions you didn't take. See? So if you, for example, if you're doing the notes here, then you just put down what you think it is. But if you're doing a commentary, you don't have to do, it's not really, I don't think, helpful to be doing a commentary on commentaries, you know, so that you're just commenting on what all the other people say. But you do have to comment on variant readings. And you do have to comment on other possibilities that you are rejecting, and why are you rejecting those? So, now, does the official Bible here in the Synod, does this say anything about that variant reading?
It's in a footnote of the ESV.
Yeah, what does it say?
Some manuscripts add, and every sacrifice will be salted with salt.
That's ESV.
Yeah, that's the ESV footnote of their actual translation.
And then do they say anything about it?
Not in the commentary.
Oh, not on the commentary, okay, yeah. But you're right about that, Janice, and in my Greek text here, it actually has two possibilities. One is, every sacrifice will be salted with salt, manuscript D, and then you have this, for every sacrifice will be salted, and every sacrifice will be salted with salt. Yeah, which is this other. So, and the text is read by preferred manuscripts without that. Yeah.
Just to back up a second to the passage that you found,
Yeah.
I don't think we need to add another value or another meaning to salt. Wasn't the purpose of commanding salt so that people were giving up something of value in their sacrifice? They said they have to add salt to it because salt had value. And they had to give up something of value in sacrifice means.
Boy, I just don't.
So I think
You
that
may be
is
right.
the value meaning of salt.
Yeah, no, you may be right. Well, listen, folks, I just looked up there when our famous cook walked by at 2 o'clock, and I see we're way over time. Boy, this really got going.
I wanted to say that footnote there simply underscores what you said 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago, that things are not self-evident.
Yeah.
Because some manuscripts decided it wasn't self-evident and wanted to put a little bit more description in it. Or even if that's the original meaning, and some thought, says, oh, well, it's self-evident without that, take it out. He said, well, it's not self-evident. It simply underscores the fact that there is nothing there that, oh, obviously, we know it.
No, it's exactly right. And it is so funny how so many things do come down to what text you choose and what the actual forms of verbs are and everything like that. It really is important. Listen, thanks a lot. You guys are really great. Really enjoyed this. Okay? So let's close with prayer today. Lord God, Heavenly Father, you have brought us together to study your word. Help us always to open our minds to receive the message that you give to us in the true word, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Good. Thanks.